Hi everyone, my name is Arnaud, and together with my colleague Alex, I would like to discuss a couple of reflections on the exercise that you entered from linear to circular value webs. The mapping exercise showed some great interesting examples, and you found a very interesting case study in Norway, right, Alex?
Yes, indeed, Arnold. Hello, everybody. Also from my side, thank you very much for all your contributions and comments. I'll start with one example of Frank Reitzmer. He introduced to us all glue-laminated timber beams, which are produced in Norway and are actually used for a very interesting building that he chose as his chosen building, which is the biggest, the tallest wood building on the planet in a Norwegian city, which I even don't try to pronounce the name because I would do it wrong. But Arnold is showing us the value web on the map that he put in. And what makes it so interesting, this example, is that it's very short distances. So as he writes, from the sawing mill and the timber production company to the construction site, it's actually only 15 kilometers, so very short distances. And he also pointed out nicely that the same company that produces the timber beams also allows to then reuse and recycle them. So the building is designed modular, so the beams can either be reused as they are, they can also be redimensioned in the company, or downcycled to a certain extent for paper production or energy use.
Very interesting. So would you consider wood? Within the exercise we considered the five most used materials in the built environment. So wood, glass, concrete, steel, or bricks. Would you say that wood is the building material with the highest potential for reuse and for circularity?
Yeah, Arnold, interesting that you point wood out, because it stands out a little bit from the other materials. Because in contrary to the others, wood as such is a renewable material. So we actually don't put energy in producing the material. It's not limited in this sense. It regrows.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then don't you think there are any dangers with regards to biodiversity or ecosystem services when wood gets harvested as a building material?
Indeed. Very, very important. That's also, Frank also pointed that nicely out in his example, that is important if we understand forests are one of the most important ecosystems on our planet. And only if the wood is actually the forestry and the wood is produced in a sustainable way, then actually it's a good and reasonable and circular way of doing it. Yeah. You remember that in the video I showed you that the impacts may occur on different locations, on different places to different people, and I think that's important. So if monocultural off timber productions is used for
the specific purpose of construction,
then there may be more negative impacts than if it's a sustainable forest.
Interesting. Okay. Very interesting case study. Indeed, nice to see that there are only 15 kilometers from, let's say, the raw material acquisition of the wood and where the sawmill is located to the eventual construction in the building. And maybe it's interesting to go from the shortest value chain to the absolutely longest one, which we saw in the exercise, which we can find in South America, actually, for the steel bars that were used in the construction of the airports of Ecuador. You see it here already in the in the green line, in which you see the iron ore mine here in Brazil, north of Belo Horizonte, and then the eventual construction within the airport here in Ecuador. I think this is a very interesting example because iron ore is a very scarce raw material, and it can only be found in like very large iron ore mines that are like only in a couple of places in the world. I think the 5 largest ones can be found in Brazil. You have, of course, China, in South Africa, Sweden, India, a couple of other ones. But it's very clear and distinct to see that within the exercise that almost every example that was entered with regards to steel, that the distances are always very long because these iron ore mines are always located in very specific places. But then, of course, the potential for reuse and for circularity of steel is more interesting in a very local place or very close to construction, and for them be reused in a different construction project, because the steel, of course, can be heated up and melted again and then be reused in a different form. This can happen very locally. Of course, in comparison or on the contrary with wood, it requires a lot of energy. So this is something we need to take into regard. And of course, the most direct way of circular reuse is to reuse the steel product in its current form. But it's something which is an interesting case, definitely if you compare it with the wood example in Norway.
And I think, Anand, what you're pointing out is right. The ideal thing would be that the building is already designed in a way that the steel can be used modular.
Yeah,
but other important things to consider is also to see whether the steel is used in a composite or alone, so that it can actually be easy separated and then recycled. That makes the recycling process much easier.
Yes, good point. Okay. I think we can conclude here with these two very interesting examples. We would like to thank you for your attention, also for the work you did in entering these amazing case studies and examples in the exercise. And we hope you enjoy the rest of the reflection week, of the final week of this MOOC.
Bye.